Okay, so today I just want to point out just how smart Claude 3 Opus is. So I was just using this website for using the Claude 3 Opus model, and I was using Opus to write me the README file for my GitHub repo, right? So this is my current README file, which is, I gave it the current README file, right? So this is my current README file. And then after giving it the README file, I provided it with the things which it needs to do, like the points of improvements which it needs to make. Okay, then I tell it good luck, and then it gives me a response for the improved GitHub README file, right? And this is the whole response. And like it cuts off here, so I tell it to go on, and then it just goes on, right? So this is the whole README file which it gave me, which is pretty impressive, but this isn't the main thing which I'm trying to point out. What I'm trying to say is what comes next, right? So pay attention. So I tell it, here is what the tree of my repo looks like. I just tell it what my repository contains, like, currently. And I was going to mention stuff which it's missing. So the issue with this response is that, don't get me wrong, this is a really, really good response, but it's mentioning stuff which doesn't even exist. For example, pip install R requirements, Python main py. Yeah. So stuff like this, which isn't even included in my actual repository when I told it to write the README file, right? So, and it didn't knew what my repo looked like because I didn't give it the whole tree structure of my repo. I just gave the README file, and so I mentioned that this is what the tree of my repo looks like, and I was going to just mention my issue here. As you can see, I have just told it as you have mentioned stuff like, and I was going to mention that it's missing stuff like requirements and other files which it has mentioned in the previous response, right? So, and here's the magic happens. It literally predicted what I was going to ask it. It literally predicted what was going on in my mind. Basically, this was a mistake, by the way. This prompt, which is this smallest prompt, this prompt was a mistake because I was going to provide it a full list of things which are missing after this, and then I was going to ask it to include these files and like to basically make these files so that I can include them on my README, so that it doesn't hallucinate these files, because currently these files doesn't even exist, right? So I was going to point it out, but this Opus model is so smart that even with my small half prompt, it was able to predict what I'm going to complain about. Like, I don't even need to tell it what my issue is. I wrote this half prompt, and by mistake I pressed enter. When I was just trying to like go to the next line, I should have pressed shift enter to go to the next line, but instead of that I mistakenly pressed enter. So it sent this prompt, and I thought this prompt was a mistake. But the Opus model was so smart that even without me telling the whole problem to it, it just predicted what the issue was that I was going to point it out, and it managed to figure out what my issue is, and then it gave me the whole response as well. Like you can see, it not only predicted what my issue was, but it also gave me the solution. So like this is just mind blowing. I'm just telling you guys that Opus is on some other level, right? Like it can not only give correct answers and stuff, it knows what I'm going to say. Like this is so weird. Like I didn't even tell it to do all of this. It predicted what I was going to complain about, and then it gave me the answer. This is so wild. Anyway, this is what I wanted to tell you about. I have heard that Opus has other big, like as we all know, obviously Opus is currently the most powerful LLM. I was actually testing it against like GPT-4 here, but I guess GPT-4 Turbo is not available at this moment. So I was just testing Opus against it, and according to the chart that I forgot what chart it was, MMLU or some shit like that. According to it, Opus is the smartest model on earth right now, and it obviously shows in conditions like this because like, how do I tell this? Normal ChatGPT is not even smart enough to give me the correct response when I give it whole prompts, and I have to literally guide normal ChatGPT, which is powered by GPT 3.5 Turbo, right? It's not even smart enough to give me correct responses when I give it the correct prompt, and here Opus is literally so smart that it's able to predict my issues and my next problem with nothing but such a small prompt, and it's then able to give me correct answers. So this is just very wild to me. And I also read in somewhere in Twitter, I think, that Opus does have logical reasoning. Like for example, previous models, I think even GPT-4 doesn't have this capability, that its knowledge is limited to whatever is present in its dataset which it was trained on, right? So it's not able to basically extend the reasoning capabilities which it derived from its dataset to new domains, right? So there was a test in which they created their own logical game or some stuff like that. I think I read it on Twitter, right? So only Claude 3 Opus was the model which was able to do that test, which included questions which were out of its training dataset. So like I think this is an emergent behavior of Claude 3 Opus, that after a level of scaling up, like I don't think they have released the exact parameter count of Claude 3 Opus and GPT-4, but I think GPT-4 is about 240 billion parameters and Claude 3 is slightly more. So I think they were not wrong when they said that with scales, new emerging properties are starting to begin in large language models. Like you haven't, like the stuff which aren't even included in its training dataset, it's able to like now solve them, and it's also developing new abilities which we didn't even expect. For example, I think this was seen with GPT-2 from 1 as well. Like GPT-1 was just an LLM which was made for bare bones next token prediction. So it was basically just able to complete sentences and stuff. And then GPT-2 came out, which was able to not only complete sentences but also write code, and like on a considerable level. So, and the only difference between these models is not even the architecture. You don't even have to be smart at engineering and architecture and stuff like that. Just the plain base model that we have right now. We just need to scale it up. Like just give it more billion parameters, give it more compute, and it will develop its own logical reasoning capabilities. It will develop its own basically abilities and a mind of its own. So this is so wild to me. Like this is kind of like in nature, I guess, when we see this is an emergent property of a system, and we aren't even like training it to a specific thing, but it's just so good at that thing because it developed it on its own by having larger amount of compute, which is basically like more neurons in a brain. So the human brain has like 1 trillion neurons, right? And the current models have 220 billion ish parameters. So if we roughly say that a neuron is equal to a parameter, then I think large language models will not will but like more like can reach AGI level when they have equivalent number of parameters in them as we have the number of cells in our brain, like the number of neurons, right? So yeah, I think we don't even need to teach it. I don't think we even need to explicitly teach it, to explicitly fine-tune it on specific data like XYZ, get good at coding, here is the best coder. Like we can do it to fine-tune it on specific benchmarks and stuff, on specific tasks, but we don't really need to. We just need scale. We just need a bigger model and just give it a bigger model, bigger compute, bigger parameter size, bigger raw data, and just like feed it, and then it will develop these abilities on its own. I think the human mind is also similar in this context. Like it develops stuff such as complex language and tool manipulation and community and society. These are all just emergent properties of the human brain, right? Nobody taught us stuff like language, right? We made this on our own. The evolutionary environment wasn't supporting these things on its own, but the human mind developed these anyways because it had emergent properties. I think these are just emergent properties which emerged in nature because of the sheer number of neurons which were in the human brain, I think, and it learned to develop new things. So I think the future of technology is going to be really wild. I think in just 2 years or so we might develop stuff which are close to human level, and here's the thing, right? We have already surpassed the human level at certain tasks. We have already surpassed the human level at chess. We have already surpassed the human, not even human level, the human expert, the pinnacle, the best of the best grandmasters can't even defeat the Go program which is built by DeepMinds, right? It's the, oh, what's it name? AlphaGo, yeah, AlphaGo Zero. AlphaGo Zero is the smartest Go model which is made right now, and AlphaGo Zero, the zero in its name signifies that it wasn't even trained on any exterior data. The model itself was just given self-play and search. So the AlphaGo Zero model was just given Go as in the rules of the game, and it played against versions of itself, and then whichever one would win the matches, they would replicate it over and over again. So not a single strategy which was developed by human data was given to the Go model, right? It wasn't given the input and strategies and matches of the expert human players. It developed all the strategies that it uses on its own. And here's the thing, AlphaGo Zero was even more smarter than AlphaGo, and AlphaGo was given the strategies of human expert Go players, but AlphaGo Zero was not given any strategies or any exterior output from the outside environment, and it developed on its own strategies. So I think the humans, when we play the game, we develop our own biases, right? And when we feed the human expert data to AI models, they take with them these biases and these flaws. They also learn these flaws. So if we train a model on expert human data, it's only going to be as good as the expert, because it's essentially just mimicking the expert at that point, right? It's just mimicking the expert, so it's only going to be as good as the expert, right? It's never going to surpass the expert level. It's not going to be artificial super intelligence. It's just going to be artificial general intelligence at best. So I think there should be some way to make large language models do self-play and search, which is essentially have large language models be able to train with themselves, like develop a big enough large language model and then allow it to conversate with itself. Don't give it any human data. And I think that large language model will still develop stuff like logical reasoning. And I think this is kind of like the fundamental nature of our universe at this point. Like then when a large enough amount of neurons, or essentially perceptrons, are bunched up together in a network, they will eventually with scale develop sentience and stuff like this. Is just my belief. Like we don't see signs of sentience in bacteria and really small organisms. Like they are to a limit very much mechanized, right? Like we can predict their movements, we can see how they move, we can even simulate them. Like I think in an earlier paper we saw scientists which were able to map out the structure of a bee. I think it was a fruit fly or something like that. They mapped out the entire neuron structure of a fruit fly, and so essentially they are able to see how the neurons of that fruit fly are, so they can predict the interactions between the neurons as well. So I think the fundamental difference between a fruit fly's brain and a human's brain is just scale, right? It's just bigger brain. I think maybe there might be evolutionary algorithms which optimize our brain to perform with efficiency, but I think it's just scale, and these abilities of logical reasoning, understanding, to use, community, society, language, all these higher intelligence things are just going to be arriving in models with scale. So yeah, it's just inevitable at this point. Like if Google doesn't do it, then Microsoft will. If Microsoft doesn't do it, then Apple will. Like by Microsoft I mean OpenAI, right? Because OpenAI is just a subsidiary of Microsoft. So I think if one company doesn't do it, other company will do it. If we place a ban on AI in USA, then China will develop it. If China doesn't do it, then Russia will do it. It's inevitable, in my opinion, at this point, that artificial superintelligence will arrive eventually, because the world has seen the capabilities of AI models, right? If the world didn't knew the capabilities of large language models, they wouldn't be funding so much of billions of dollars in the AI industry right now. Like it's insanely booming. I think a increase of 30% of funds are expected this year. So right, I think someone is going to develop it. Even if they see risks, they are going to develop it. If one country doesn't do it, if one company doesn't do it, then some other company or country will do it. It's like the information, the seed of the capabilities of AI have been implanted into the brains of human race. So now that this seed is implanted, it will grow. It's inevitable in my opinion right now. And like when the point comes that AI is that smart that it's able to surpass humans at logical reasoning as well, and stuff like mathematics, logical reasoning, scientific development, I think these will come eventually when we have developed large enough LMs and stuff, and we won't even need to teach them explicitly, as we have seen in AlphaGo Zero. It can display on its own and develop these capabilities, and I think the similar thing can happen with large language models. So we wouldn't need it to tell how to make a cancer treatment drug, or how to cure poverty, or how to solve world hunger. These problems are there because essentially humans have not really figured out the solution to these big human condition problems, right? We continue to suffer from them because we just can't do it. We aren't that smart. We haven't figured out a way which works. And all the efforts which we have tried are just really small. And I think if an AI system is able to get into that level of intelligence, which it's able to predict human next moves, and with a large enough scale, it's going to happen eventually that an AI system, and that such an AI system will arrive, which is going to give us literal research papers will be written which are going to be the answer to these problems. Like you can just tell it to solve cancer and it researches all of the internet, it doesn't find it, it uses its own understanding of the universe, and it just gives us the drug or the solution to that specific problem. But like my current issue, or like my current problem with these things is like the AI models are going to get a bit too smart, and I think with this intelligence people are going to get greedy, because if you have the smartest AI model, you can essentially develop stuff like ultrasonic missiles and blueprints for them, and how to better optimize the economy, and how can a specific leader remain the leader forever and immortality. So basically it's essentially knowledge is power, right? So obviously all the countries in the world are going to race towards it, and it's only going to get faster and faster because the rate of progress, it essentially compounds in on itself. Like if there is a discovery in one field, it not only helps in that field, it helps all the other fields. For example, if there is a discovery made in medicine which is able to let people not die out of, let's say, heart attacks, so it's essentially the single discovery in the field of medicine is going to help us in all other fields, because it's increasing the life expectancy of a base human, and with longer life expectancy comes stuff like more ability to research, more ability to develop. People are dying less, which means they can live more, which means they can do more stuff, which means it's a compounding effect. They can do more stuff, which means they can develop more stuff, which means they can develop even more better heart related disease prediction and stuff like that, right? So it's compounding. So I think this pace of technology will just keep on increasing, and so yeah, that is my concern, because whosoever gets their hand first on ASI might not use it for the collective gain of the whole human species. He might just use it for his own motives, his own selfish greeds, and instead of making a benevolent AI, he might end up making our future into a dystopia, right? So yeah, there is this ominous future which is, in my opinion, at this point inevitable, and we are not prepared. The crowd doesn't, like the general public doesn't know that there are already AI models which are smarter than average human at many tasks, like this coding as well, which I was testing Opus on. I don't know coding, but I'm literally using Opus to write code, to write README files, because I can just keep on asking it. Like, I know it's not as good as a human expert, but the general public is also not as good as the human expert, right? So it's essentially just making me smarter. And when the point comes that it's able to surpass human experts, there would essentially be no need for human experts in that field, right? You can just make an AI model which is able to provide answers 100 times faster than human experts, and it's cheaper. It's cheaper in the way that you just have to make it more efficient, and you can distill it down to make better models with less compute, and the human's monthly salary will be too expensive for the companies, and at that point I think jobs will be replaced. And I think, yeah, that's that. And I don't know what the future holds. I want to save people. I want the future to be a utopia, not a dystopia. But I do think that power corrupts, and the concentration of power that a smart enough artificial superintelligence is going to give to a single institution or a person is going to be enough to corrupt them into making a dictatorship or a dystopia. So I think the solution to that might be that somehow open source models get more and more. Somehow open source models should get more advanced, right? That they are able to surpass the closed source models. But the issue with that is that closed source models have more money, they have backing up, they have more money and compute and servers, and OpenAI Sam Altman is looking forward to make Stargate, which is like the biggest GPU cluster in America, and with that big enough compute, they're going to make GPT-5 or 6 or some shit like that, which is going to be surpassing humans at essentially all language tasks. They're going to have literal monopoly, and we aren't prepared. We as a species is not prepared because normal people don't see the risk. They don't know how good Sora is. They don't know how good Opus is. They don't know how good Udio is. Udio is, by the way, a music generating AI, which is able to generate really good music, and Sora is a video generator AI, which is already not released to public, and it's making really good videos which are with just a prompt. And I don't know. I think large enough. I think the path to AGI is just scale. They just take a big enough supercomputer and just make the AlphaGo 0 equivalent of model, but for text. Like instead of Go, it's just Alpha Text 0, and it surpasses all humans at all language tasks. And then they ask it to make as much money as possible, like the OpenAI researchers, right? And then they have monopoly because they have intelligence, and intelligence is power. And you know my concerns, right? And I don't see a way out of this paradox. How are we supposed to stop them or regulate them? When, like, how can I do it instead of ranting here? There is nothing I can do except try, I guess. But what should I even do? I'm going to transcribe this whole conversation. YouTube पे भी डाल दूंगा मैं इसको. And then I'm literally going to ask Opus what I should do to prevent a dystopia and to give humans a good enough future, and what I can do as an individual. I don't believe that I'm powerless. I refuse to believe that I'm powerless against big enough corporations, even though that is logically the most appropriate truth. But I refuse to die like this. I refuse to give up. Even if there is a 0.001% chance of me making it, even if there is a 0.001% chance of me enabling utopia for humanity, I should dedicate my entire self to that task. Like, I don't think there is anything bigger or any higher goals which I can achieve than this, right, in my lifetime. I think my life itself is a miracle. To be born in such a loving family, in such a supportive family, to have interests in fields which then blow up, such as AI, to be born at the correct time in history. Like, how rare is that? Man, I wish I could save humanity. I could